Hi, this is just amazing. So I just push a button and you all just control yourselves. So welcome. Thank you all for being here. This is just fantastic. I want to give you a little bit of background, a little explanation of what we're doing. First of all, as you see, most of the time, everybody's going to be muted. So I have a couple of suggestions. First of all, I would suggest that you put your Zoom on speaker view. It's nice that we can like zoom through and see everybody, but in fact, the individual people, as people speak, you might get more out of this by being on speaker view. I am recording this Zoom, so afterwards, people can enjoy it afterwards as well. So just so you know that it's being recorded. When we get to the end of our carol singing, then at that point, there's going to be an option to hang around and have some more intimate chats in little breakout groups. The system will break us into groups of 4, and we can just have a chat. So if that's something that interests you, you could be thinking about it, and you know that at the end, I'll give you the chance to either check out or hang around, and we'll have a chat together. Now, everybody's muted right now, but you're welcome to unmute yourself at any time and comment on what we're singing or whatever. So the easiest way to mute or unmute yourself is just if you're on a PC, use Alt-A on your keyboard. That will mute and unmute you. Or if you're on a Mac, just Command-Shift-A will mute and unmute you. So you're all sitting there looking rapt at your screens. I assume this means you can actually hear me? Yes? Good. Oh, I like this. Is such a sense of control. Organists love this. It's wonderful to see everybody and so many people with a special connection to St. John's and friends of the church and friends of friends. We have people who've joined from all over the world, and this is really, really fun. I would like to especially welcome the Primate of the Anglican Church of Canada, Archbishop Linda Nichols. So Archbishop, thank you for being with us, because that's great. Let me give you a bit of background to how this came to be, because you know every fall I do a hymn sing with the parish, and so we have a little potluck supper, and then we sit around at the piano and we sing hymns. And I always prepare a selection of hymns, a lot of hymns that we ought not to be singing because their theology is suspect or they're too much corn content in them. So when I was invited to do a hymn sing this fall, and I was thinking what to do, and I couldn't think of anything. And then I thought, wait, there's nothing happening in December. We could do a December hymn sing. And then I thought, oh, good, I could do a whole presentation on cornball hymns of Christmas. And then as I thought about it, I thought, nobody wants to sing corn. We can't sing anything. We haven't been able to sing in church since last March. The last thing people want to do is make fun of singing. We want to sing all the good old favorites that we know and love. So this is what we're going to do today, is sing pieces that are traditionally connected with Advent and Christmas. Now, here's the thing about Advent. For Christians in the sacramental tradition, where we follow the church year, Christmas begins December 25th. Well, actually the night before, we do a little vigil, and then Christmas begins the 25th and lasts for 12 days. Hence you get to sing the 12 days after Christmas. So for many years, when we would do a concert in December, I would only perform Advent music because I was very pure. And so this was really important that we not sing Christmas music before Christmas. And then I got thinking about it and I thought, okay, for us in the church, yes, you know, Christmas begins December 25th. But for everybody else in the world, Christmas begins right after American Thanksgiving when Santa appears in the mall. And so I thought it's rather disconnected for me in the church to try and be like a part of what's going on in the world, but absolutely refusing to acknowledge Christmas in December. So I stopped being pure several years ago, as many of my friends can attest. And so now we do Christmas and Advent in our concerts. So today we're going to sing 4 pieces for Advent and 4 pieces for Christmas. Some of them you may know, some of them not, whatever. The words will be on the screen. And I invite you to sing along while you're muted and make a joyful noise in your home. And we'll talk about each hymn or carol in advance so that we know a little bit about what it's doing. Each hymn, each one will be introduced by a different person. And the very first piece we're going to sing will be O Come, Emmanuel. Many of you know it. And Grayson is going to tell us about that.
That I will. Can you hear me okay?
Sounds good.
Perfect. So O Come, Emmanuel is it's a very characteristic hymn of Advent. Since medieval times, Advent has been marked by the daily singing of the O antiphons, O King of Kings, O Key of David, etc. This hymn presents the various O antiphons in a poetic translation by John Mason Neale, and the source of the melody, long unknown, but was discovered in 1966 in an ancient manuscript of funeral melodies in the Bibliothèque Nationale de Paris. At St. John's, this is always the first hymn of the first Sunday in Advent, and always the last hymn of the last Sunday in Advent. So if you'll join us, we'll all sing O Come, Emmanuel together.
this is very heartening to see everybody's mouths moving. I assume that this means across the world, there's great music happening. So that is just superb. We're going to have Barbara Durrell now introduce our next piece as we move along through all the various joys of Advent music.
Hark, a herald voice is sounding. The customary Advent hymn for the morning service in the monastic rite. Vox clara ecce intonat. The text was translated into English in 1849 by Edward Caswell. Originally, he used the word thrilling. Hark, a thrilling voice is sounding. In 1971, the compiler of the Red Hymn Book, Stanley Osborne, referred to this music as undistinguished. We think it has a little bit more pizzazz than that, helped along by a stratospheric descant by our irrepressible sopranos in verse 5. So join with us to sing Hark, a herald voice is sounding.
Excellent, excellent. I love it. So I thought it was really a good idea that we have some Canadian content, of course, and no one better to introduce this than my friend Peter Nikiforuk. I'd like to introduce you all to Peter. Peter Nikiforuk is the national president of the Royal Canadian College of Organists. And as well, he's the director of music at St. Peter's Evangelical Lutheran Church in Kitchener. So I thought no one better than to introduce a bit of Canadian content. Peter.
Thanks, Gordon. And thank you for inviting me to participate in this sing-along on behalf of the RCCO and also my own congregation of St. Peter's in Kitchener. I bring Advent and Christmas greetings to all of you attending today, and I'm very impressed at the attendance numbers. I've been looking. We were at 100 the last time I looked. The next hymn is There's a Voice in the Wilderness Crying, which is particularly appropriate for Advent 3, as the gospel refers to the story of John the Baptist. This text was written by James Lewis Milligan, who's a Methodist layman who was commissioned to write a hymn to celebrate the union of the Methodist, Congregationalists, and Presbyterian churches in Canada in 1925. And the text of his hymn is based on Isaiah chapter 40, prepare a highway for our God, which obviously is the prophecy that John the Baptist will be coming. And in the additional Canadian content, Milligan worked in Southern Ontario. Hugh Bancroft was many years the organist of All Saints Anglican Cathedral in Edmonton, and he also has many connections with Winnipeg. And this hymn also has a special connection for me personally, as it was included in the Old Anglican United Church Red Hymn Book, which was published in 1971. My congregation was an early adopter of that hymn book, and the husband and wife music leaders at Colburn Street United Church in Brantford, where I grew up, were diligent about introducing the new hymns in this hymn book. And the junior choir was responsible for introducing this hymn when I was singing in it. We were the meanest, nastiest, horriblest junior choir you've ever seen in your life, but we did sing rather nicely. Mark Perry was the organist there, and my first organ teacher, and he is also a past president of the RCCO in the late 70s, and his wife Nan was my piano teacher. So join with me in singing "There's a Voice in the Wilderness Crying."
There's a voice in the wilderness crying, a call from the ways untrod, preparing the desert a highway for our God. The valley shall be exalted, the lofty hills brought low, make straight all the crooked places where the Lord our God may go. O Zion, give voice to glad tidings, ascend to the heights and sing, proclaim to a desolate people the coming of their King. The words of cry all perish, like flowers they shall decay. The power and pomp of nations shall pass like a dream away. But your word, O God, is faithful. Your arm, O Lord, is strong. You stand in the midst of nations, and you will right the wrong. You feed your flock like a shepherd, and fold the lambs to your breast. In pastures of peace you lead them, and give to the weary rest. There's a voice in the wilderness crying, a call from the ways untrod, preparing the desert a highway for our God. The valley shall be exalted, the lofty hills brought low, make straight all crooked places where the Lord our God may go.
Such an amazing piece. There's so much interesting music coming from cathedrals in Canada. And I'm really happy to introduce a cathedral organist to introduce our next hymn. I'd like to introduce to you all Dr. Neil Coburn. Neil is the organist and director of music at the Cathedral Church of the Redeemer in Calgary, and a superb organist and a complete scallywag. And I thought just a perfect person to introduce our next piece for us. Hi, Neil.
Hi, Gordon. Thank you so much for inviting me. There's lots to be sad or frustrated about in our current situation, but for me, the silver lining in the cloud is we're doing all sorts of wonderful things like this, bringing people together in ways that we've never done. So thank you. I bring greetings from the Cathedral Choir in Calgary. Gordon, you've been with us a couple of times since we've all been closed down and sharing your gifts and talents with us too. So it's a pleasure for me to be here today. I'm delighted you asked me to talk about this hymn because it's one of my very favorite hymns of all times. I'm a great lover of early music and Baroque opera in particular, and so the images in this hymn just, whenever I think of Lully or Rameau or even Handel setting this in an opera, if they were to, I can imagine some elaborate stage machinery with clouds and things coming, and the Lord comes on a chariot. I mean, it's such potential material. It's like those Baroque churches where there's plaster all over the wall and there's a sort of meeting of heaven and earth, and there's half of an angel's leg sticking out of the wall made of plaster. It's so pictorial. I absolutely love it. It reminds me of in Elijah. Let me read you the quick passage of when Elijah goes up to heaven. It says, Elijah, the prophet, break forth like fire. His word appears like burning torches. Mighty kings by him were overthrown. There came a fiery chariot with fiery horses, and he went by a whirlwind to heaven. So for me, this is kind of the reverse thing. This hymn talks about the second coming of Jesus from Revelation chapter 1 verse 7, which in our new Revised Standard Version is, look, he is coming with the clouds. Every eye will see him, even those who pierced him. And on his account, all of the tribes of the earth will wail. So it is to be, amen. Interesting that wail word is still wail as in wailing, not as in making a noise or grieving, not as in going to BC and looking for whales in the sea, obviously. But in the original version or an early version of the hymn, verse 2 has deeply wailing, which in our modern hymnal has been changed to deeply grieving. The original version of this hymn probably was written by an Englishman called John Cennick for a collection of sacred hymns in 1752. And I didn't know that early version until I looked it up for this, and I adore it even more. Listen to this, is the first version. Lo, he cometh, countless trumpets blow to raise the sleeping dead. Handel only gave us one trumpet. I mean, countless trumpets. This is an amazing thought to me. I just love this idea. So Charles Wesley revised it for hymns of intercession for all mankind in 1758. The tune we now sing for this was written by the Welshman Thomas Olivers. I also found out when I was learning about this hymn that some people sing it to Regent's Square, which is lo, he comes with clouds descending, which I think is rather strange, but sometimes we can perceive a new accent of the words of a hymn if we change the words. Just before we start with this, I do encourage you, I have a favorite CD with this hymn sung by Maddie Pryor, where she sings a collection of 18th century hymns with strange Cornish accents and so on, and early instruments. It's a wonderful other way to listen to this hymn. Gordon tells us, as usual, you can't tie the sopranos down in the last verse, and the final rubato is joyously theatrical, and so it should be for words like this. Gordon, take it away.
just that last little piece of stained glass, because that's the big ascension window from the back of St. John's Church. And I've always thought our windows were in the wrong order because we've got the best window at the back. So now I have a big question. Haley Swanton was going to be joining us, and I wonder if Haley, did you actually get in? Is there a Haley?
I made it!
You did? Oh, sweetheart, that's good. That's great. Gaston just told me he tried to log in and he couldn't. And so I'm sitting here thinking, but wait, Haley's going to be joining us. So Haley is joining us from England. Haley was a choral scholar at St. John's, and we have a wonderful tradition of choral scholars and so many wonderful choral scholars over the years. So Haley, tell us about your life. Don't leave anything out. Introduce a hymn.
Pip, pip, cheerio! Greetings from across the sea in the motherland. I'm so excited to be here and to be introducing this hymn, especially because it has such a great tradition here in England. And I've even come prepared with my English hymnal from the C of E, as we refer to it here, the Church of England. And that is England's obviously national religion, and the Queen is both the head of state and the head of church. So this next hymn that I'm about to introduce you is, as I said, famous here. And the text actually originated as a poem by an Irish poet by the name of Cecile Frances Alexander. And it was published in 1848 in her book, Hymns for Little Children. And these hymns were used to help teach children the Apostles' Creed. And you'll probably have come across her texts before, because she also wrote the words to All Things Bright and Beautiful. Now, I wanted to bring in a little bit of the English tradition into this now to introduce this hymn, because one of the things is this hymn is the inaugural hymn that the choir of King's College, Cambridge sings every year at the start of their 9 lessons and carols. So we all know that the opening verse is usually sung by a boy treble or is a soprano solo. But what you probably didn't know is that poor little soprano only finds out that they are going to sing the solo on the day that the broadcast takes place. But the legend actually is that the King's College Choir, it is the choir master who points to the boy soprano just as the broadcast is about to start to say that you are in fact going to sing the solo. So talk about a bit of a nightmare before Christmas, because the soloist, which is one of the most famous 9 lessons and carols across England, only finds out at the start of the broadcast. So without further ado, I think that tonight's next carol is Once in Royal David City.
Once in royal David's city stood a lowly cattle shed, where a mother laid her baby in a manger for his bed. Mary was that mother mild, Jesus Christ her little child. He came
Thanks for that, Haley. That's great. You sound good even so far away. Oh, so that's such great memories of you being in the choir. Now, you may have noticed from the sound that you could hear the trumpets come in the last verse. And you know, that's one of the things I thought at Christmas time at St. John's, there's always trumpets. And this year has been a disaster for professional musicians because most musicians lost all their gigs. So when I contacted our trumpet players and said, you know, can you play? Yeah, they were like all available. So this is really, really cool to have brass and timpani with us for the Christmas portion of these hymns. Now, as well as having choral scholars, we also have a wonderful artist in residence who many of you know, Cara Gilbertson. And Cara is really very much the heart and soul of our choir. And I've asked Cara to introduce the next hymn.
Oh my goodness, Gordon, thank you. I'm going to get a little teary from that. Thank you. It's so great to see everyone here. This is just wonderful. I'm excited to introduce our next hymn in our sing-along today, Silent Night. My parents told me that when I was little, I would wake them up every morning singing Christmas carols from my crib, and apparently one of my favorites was Silent Night, and it still is one of my favorites today. The text was written in 1818 by Joseph Mohr, the assistant priest at St. Nicholas's Church in Oberndorf near Salzburg, Austria. He then took the text to his organist, Franz Gruber, who composed the music intending to perform it on Christmas Eve of that year. And of course, nothing ever goes wrong when you have your best laid plans. Unfortunately, the organ broke down before the service, so Gruber accompanied it on the guitar. And interestingly, it was originally scored for 2 male voices, with the choir coming in only on the last 4 measures. It appears that for the first performance, Mohr sang the upper part while Gruber sang the lower part and played the guitar at the same time. The choir crooned the ending of each verse. When I came to the University of Ottawa in 1995 to do my undergraduate degree in music, I met a wonderful pianist by the name of Evelyn Greenberg, who quickly became someone I looked up to for inspiration on so many levels. I cannot think of a greater ambassador of music and mentor to musicians of all ages than Evelyn has been to our entire community throughout her long and successful career as a collaborative pianist and teacher. In 2006, when I returned to Ottawa to do my master's, I joined the choir of St. John's, and I was thrilled to learn that every Christmas Eve, Evelyn would come and accompany our carol sing. Indeed, although Evelyn is Jewish, she has said on many occasions that she considers St. John's to be her church. I am honored to welcome our dear friend to lead us in the singing of Silent Night. Happy Hanukkah, Evelyn.
Hi everyone, please join me in singing one of the most beloved of all Christmas carols, Silent Night, 3 verses.
The
Such a terrific hymn. Now, I have a little story to tell because when I came to Ottawa, which is a little over 40 years ago, I only intended to stay for 1 year. And I came here, why? You know why? To learn a bit of French. You know, I'd finished my studies in the United States. I wanted to come back home to Canada. And I thought, well, I should learn some French. And so I came to Ottawa and I took a French class. And that's where Evelyn and I met. Our connection, our first connection is through going to French class together. And over the years, it's been wonderful to have a very good friendship. That's really one of my first friendships in Ottawa. So Evelyn, thank you for everything. Thank you for all that you do for St. John's and for music and musicians in Ottawa. You know, I have learned that there are certain choir members who require a great deal of dealing with kid gloves and being careful and worrying about their feelings. Wendy Williamson-Scrim is not one of those. She's extremely robust, but I just didn't want to cross her anyways. I didn't want to take any chances. And so we're going to do Wendy's favorite Christmas hymn, which is also, I think, one of my favorites. So Wendy, why don't you tell us about your favorite hymn?
Thanks, Gordon. I really appreciate that I'm actually getting to do this. So tradition has it that this, the first and earliest Canadian carol, was written by Saint Jean de Brébeuf, a Jesuit missionary living in New France during the first half of the 17th century. There is no record of his original text, but in the late 1700s, a Jesuit missionary wrote down the Huron words as he heard them. They were subsequently translated into French. The text we sing today is not a translation, but a paraphrase by Jessie Edgar Middleton, twice removed from the Huron original and tailored to suit the melody. Middleton was raised in Strathroy, Ontario, near London, educated in Ottawa, and spent most of his life as a choirmaster of Centennial United Church in Toronto. He wrote "'Twas in the Moon of Wintertime," also known as the Huron Carol, in 1927. And here it is.
Instead
Well, Wendy, I like that you and I have similar tastes in music because I just think that's such a gorgeous piece. That's really one of my favorites as well. As I said at the very beginning, we're really honored to have with us today Archbishop Linda Nichols, who is the primate of the Anglican Church of Canada. And Your Grace, we would be happy to hear from you now.
Thank you very much, Gordon. It is a delight to be with you this afternoon, and particularly because we are singing. I found these last few weeks to be particularly a struggle. I think it's just the weight of 9 months of being in isolation, of being cut off from worship, gathered worship. But it's also just the weight of the sadness that's around us. The sadness of a world that is clearly broken, broken by the virus, of course, by the incredible sacrifice of so many people in healthcare, making it possible for us to be well. The sacrifice of those who are essential workers who don't have a choice in order to feed us. And reading the stories of refugees and others whose lives are just so filled with pain and struggle. And I've really found the weight of that this fall really hard to bear. And this morning I was sitting in my living room thinking, okay, I need to feel better about something, and decided that what I needed was to sing. Because I think it is in singing that our hearts are brought into tune with what we know is good news. There is a saying that if you want to feel better, you don't just think your way into it, you act your way into it, you put your body into it. And singing does that for us. It lifts our bodies and our spirits by bringing us together with the words and the music that brings us in touch with all the other times that we have sung these wonderful and beautiful hymns. The times in church, the times on a Sunday morning, the times on a Christmas Eve with the lights low and the candles lit. It reminds us too in the words that despite all the pain of the world around us, God chooses to act through something that is seemingly insignificant. A baby in a backyard, and changes everything. And it gives me hope again that despite all that is discouraging or despairing around, God isn't finished with this world yet. There is hope. And we can touch that hope again by hearing the stories both of Advent and Christmas, and by singing our way into that place of oneness with that hope. And so I was really delighted when Gordon invited me to be with you this afternoon. Some of you may know that every cleric needs a hobby, something they do that has nothing to do with the church. And my hobby is to sing in a choir. And of course, that choir has been canceled since March and canceled through the whole of this year. And so to be able to come and sing with you is a real gift, to lift my heart and spirit and to be in touch with this beauty that we know. And that leads us into our final hymn. And I was a bit surprised to learn in the notes that Gordon shared with me that this hymn was not originally or even normally a Christmas hymn. And yet I don't think I could ever hear it without thinking of Christmas. And it is the carol Joy to the World. It apparently, its strong association with Christmas is peculiarly Canadian. The text is by Isaac Watts. It's a paraphrase of verses 8 and 9 of Psalm 98 about making a joyful noise to the Lord. In its original publication, the composer Lowell Mason indicated that the music was, quote, arranged from Handel, end quote, but there's no evidence in Handel's music of anything beyond the first 4 notes. It is most likely a creation of Mason himself. But I don't think we can ever hear it without hearing its associations with so many times of worship and of Christmas and of singing carols. So let us finish by singing Joy to the World.
a hoot. I love it. I love it. I love it. So you know what's so especially cool? Every time I've been listening to that clip all week as I was prepared this, I hear the trumpets come in and the cymbal sizzle at the end, and I think, oh Lord, this is St. John's. Suspended cymbals and trumpets, and it's so wonderful. And I am very, very grateful for the opportunity to make music with you. Thank you for being with us today and remembering the fulsome years that we've been able to celebrate together, even remembering now during this spare year. So as I suggested earlier, we're done singing now, but if any of you would like to just hang around, we'll break out into small groups and have just small group discussion for about 10 minutes. So we'll take just a minute. If you're interested, hang around. If you are not, then just click down in the bottom of your screen, click on end, and I think off you go, and I think that's how it works. But this is a bit of a tradition for our choir. You know, we have choir Zoom every Thursday night when we should be having choir practice. And we always check in with each other and just see how each other's doing and how everybody is. I think it's one of the things that I miss the most about choir is, you know, being together. It's so funny because Thursday night, the very first Thursday night of the pandemic, like, I just thought, like, what are you supposed to do on a Thursday night? Because I've never done anything else on Thursday night but go to choir. And so we're really, really fortunate to have so many wonderful people making music